Welcome back to my channel, y'all. Episode 5, Underground. Let's get into it. I'm a little bit under the weather, so I'm going to try to make this as quick as possible. I'm going to group the storylines together so it flows more easily for me. Let's start off with Kato. Kato almost had cool points, and then he went and lost them all. Like, the people protecting him obviously have no training. It was just horrible. But anyway, let's start at the beginning. So Kato's putting on a play, and it's called Powell's Players, and he has the people come out, and they have on whiteface, and so the white people in the audience are like looking around like, is this for real? Like, is he serious? And they get up and they start leaving one by one. So moving on, after the play, you see Kato talking to the people that he has in the play, and they were saying that this was like the first time that nobody had thrown anything at the stage. So I guess that was progress for them. I was wondering how the people had heard about it, but I guess maybe that's one of the ways that he's making money now, is to put on these productions. But I don't see how, because the people didn't like it. So who's telling them to come? Who's telling more people to come back? And Francis is basically telling him that he is poking a bear. They're not in London anymore. He hasn't been there long enough to want to see him get hung. He's trying to warn him, like, you need to lay low. And Kato's like, I'm not laying low. Like, I'm gonna go, I guess, kill the bear. I don't know. And I was trying to figure out why Francis was so against what Kato was doing. He's telling him about the party that he's having, and Francis says that he's not coming. His idea of a good time is, Kato, Debbie, and him in London. Next scene, I think, goes to the party, and Kato is walking down the stairs, and he's telling the crowd how he got the scar on his face. His master lost the bet, and the embers from the fire burned him. And he said the way that you get to white people, is capitalism and money. He's like, we need this to win, basically. At the party, there is Frederick Douglass and William Still. He invited them, and he's obviously in Philadelphia. And I am going to point out the fact I was surprised that they had Frederick Douglass being played by John Legend, which I'm sure most of you were as well, but it's all good. He didn't have that big of a part. He just tells, they have a conversation about, freedom, and I just remember him saying something about him being the most photographed man or something like that. At this time, Kato's also looking through the party. He's looking at the guests, I guess just making sure everything is going well, because he is the host of this party and it's at his house. And he sees Patty and August, and so he comes up to them, and he's like, what are you guys doing here? This was by invitation only. And they tell him, all we want to do is talk. Meet us by the bar when you're ready. So eventually one of his men comes up, and he's like, what do you want us to do? And he tells them nothing right now. And then he says Francis is coming back with a surprise from England, which I was surprised, because Francis literally left like the day before, so that was really, really quick. But anyway, moving on. They tell them, well, he asks him how much time does he have, and he says not that long or something like that, and he's like, get everybody out. So he ends the party abruptly, and he tells Mr. Still and Frederick Douglass that he has to go, or the party's ending now. And so it was a fundraiser, obviously, for the cause, and so they leave, and he goes outside to where Patty and August are, and he's like, okay, let's talk. And Patty and August are like, well, do you know where Black Rose is? And he's like, never heard of her. And so she's like, well, she goes by the name, or you know her by the name Rosalie. And she asks him, well, do you know where she is? And he says, come closer. And so she comes closer, and he's like, get out of my house. He yells at her, and she was scared. She took out her gun on him. They were kind of on edge right then. So Kato's trying to calm everything down, and I think he said that something about the sculptures and how he didn't want them to be ruined, and he has money to buy more. So he takes a gun out, and I don't know if he makes the first shot. It was really confusing to tell who was who. Kato's people are coming out of the shadows, and I guess they are like, you know, looking to kill Patty and August. They start shooting, but literally August shoots like all of them. He doesn't get shot, and I don't think Patty gets shot. He shoots at somebody, I don't think it hits him. Next thing he knows, when he comes up, all of his men are dead in a pile right there. And I think it was only 4, but still. So that was crazy, because clearly whoever he hired, they don't really know how to fight with guns, I guess. They ask him again, and this time August has him around the neck, and he's like, where's Black Rose? Where can we find her? And he says that if you want to find her, you got to go through her mom. That's all she really cares about. So you find her mom, you find her. She says that's all you had to say in the first place. Francis comes back with Debbie, and he takes out his gun right away, but he was like moving in slow motion, like he couldn't shoot. So that was weird. So before he even got a shot off, Patty's boy toy shot Francis in the head. I don't think he saw him. And then they took Debbie as hostage, and they took Kato. So we don't know what's going on with that. We see the last scene, I think, in the episode where Patty tells August and one of her men, go find Mama or bring her back here or something like that. So she's staying at the house. What she's doing at the house, I have no idea. I think this is how they're going to get caught up, because everybody still thinks that Miss Ernestine is at the Macon plantation and she's actually at the Rowe plantation, which, let's go ahead and jump into her storyline. They have pulled her out of the water. They obviously saved her. That was the last time we saw her, is when she tried to commit suicide and drown herself. They pull her out, and they're shaming her now. They're telling her to give up the name of the person who gave you the opiates, who gave you the drugs. She's not saying who it is, but she ultimately says, this isn't family. You want to shame me, something like that. That's not what families do, basically. And that let them know that as a community, she doesn't consider them as a family, in my opinion. So moving right along, Clara comes up to Mr. Ernestine and says, I want you to teach me how to make the master, I guess, not fall in love with me, but teach me how to seduce him, in other words. So she takes Clara under her wing, which I thought was a bad idea, because this is how Miss Ernestine got herself in this mess to begin with. But anyway, she takes Clara under her wing, and she fixes up her hair. They make some bread pudding. They go bring to the master. He's out there with some horses. He sees Clara, looks at the horse like she's interested. She comes up to the horse and tries to pet him, and the horse kind of jumps at her. She says to him, don't laugh at me, because he laughs. And I thought that was kind of outspoken for her to even say that to him, but he seems like a laid-back kind of guy, so I guess, you know, anything goes. He tells her that it's okay, and she starts petting the horse again, and he looks at her. She has these pretty brown eyes, and Miss Ernestine interrupts their little connection that they have going on, and she tells Clara that they need to get back to the slave quarters. So Clara asks her, like, did I do something wrong? And she's like, no, but you have to make him miss you. She tells her to come back at night, and when she comes back at night, she's like, you stay a little bit longer. I think the next thing we see is Miss Ernestine in the tub, and she's washing herself, and we have Hicks playing his banjo, and he's singing a song talking about, I think it was Be With Me. Don't know who it's by, and he basically wants to apologize for her. He feels bad that she wanted to kill herself. He feels like it's his fault. So he says that he's sorry, and she says that you never raised a hand to me. And we're all confused because, well, I'm not confused. Basically, she's saying, you don't know me, you don't even know yourself, because we're just living out this cycle of abuse. And then he goes back to that same point of Clara, like, oh, I see that girl that got in your head, and everybody, I guess, is looking at him like, you just don't get it. And she tells him that it's over. And he said that he would never raise a hand to her, and just like a classic abuser, he turns around and starts trash talking her when she says that it's over. And then he pulls out the opiate, and he's like, you're not done with this. And then she goes right back to it. So I was disappointed in that. The main point that I want to stress that Miss Ernestine taught Clara is that you need to be quiet more and listen, because all men want to feel like you listen to them and they're teaching you something that no one else has taught you. And so I think Clara takes every piece of advice that Miss Ernestine gives her, and she uses it to her advantage. At the same time where they show Hicks playing the banjo, they show that Clara went back to, I guess, the horses where the master was, and they start walking and talking, and they end up kissing on the beach. She goes and tells Miss Ernestine that it worked. You know, we kissed, and I guess it's going to escalate further. And Miss Ernestine says, good, because you're going to get me off this island. I'm so happy that she is ready to move on and she's going to find a way off of this plantation, I guess. I don't know what that means for Rosalie, but let's move on to Elizabeth and Georgia. So their storyline started with a warrant being issued for Georgia. The police come to the house and they're like, who is Georgia? Where is she? And nobody says anything. Lucas says, well, nobody's leaving here without a fight. I thought he was about to, you know, take out the guns and stuff. Elizabeth even goes and she starts looking for a gun. I think that's what she was looking for anyway. And Georgia sees her and she's like, well, let me just give myself up. And she tells them, I'm Georgia. They take her away. And Georgia tells her right before she leaves, she says, go get the black folder in my desk drawer or something like that. So she goes up there and she looks and she sees that Georgia has freedom papers, which means Georgia has been passing for white all this time, which I couldn't really tell. I think they did a good job on the hair and everything like that because she's super light, so I really couldn't tell. You know, I thought she was, but I wasn't sure. So yeah. And when she finally gets out, Georgia, I'm just gonna go between Georgia and Elizabeth really quickly to tie that up. And Elizabeth asks her, why didn't you tell me? You obviously, you know, are having issues. And Georgia says, it's none of your business, which I was taken aback by. Like, you helped Elizabeth through her husband's death, and now she's trying to help you and you don't want her help. Like, okay. And she tells her some story about her mom, how she almost doesn't remember her mom, which I wasn't really sure, like, what does that pertain to as far as you passing? I guess that has something to do with her passing as white. Hopefully all will be explained in the next episodes. Since George's house can no longer be used to hide the cargo, they have to hide it somewhere else. Elizabeth goes with Lucas out, and while some other people have already moved the cargo, they're basically trying to draw them away from George's house in another direction. At first they're riding along, and then Elizabeth or Lucas, I'm not sure which one, says let's stop for a break. So they stop. They start talking about Mr. Brown and how Mr. Brown and Harriet have met last year, and that she's gonna have a speech, which I think we'll see in the next episode. Elizabeth tells Lucas she wonders what her husband would have thought of Mr. Brown's war. She says that he would have been perfect for one of Mr. Brown's men. And then Lucas asks her, what do you think of Mr. Brown's war? And we see bags placed over their heads, and they're being tied up to trees. And Elizabeth is talking to this one guy, and he's basically telling her, your friend Georgia wanted to be white. Do you want to be black? Because if that's the case, I can brand you like I do a black person. Obviously, he used other language that I'm not going to use. And she said that, go ahead, I am a slave stealer, do what you have to do. She gets really angry. She starts yelling. I think she's more so leaning towards Mr. Brown's followers now than the sewing circle. And I don't think they actually brand her, but he did cut her on the back with a knife and she started bleeding. So they eventually leave because he says, I'm going to come back and find you if you're still doing what you're doing, which she's going to continue to do anyway. So let's go back to Rosalie and Noah. At the beginning, Elizabeth was writing a letter to Mr. Steele to let him know, you know, everything was going as planned. Soon after that, somebody knocks at the door and says Georgia has a guest, and we see Noah walk in, and he sees Rosalie for the first time, and I don't know how long. It's been so long. And it was just beautiful, you guys, so beautiful. They reunited, and she was touching him to make sure he was real, and they kissed. And then she starts telling him about everything that she learned from Moses, and she also says that I have something to tell you, which we all thought was that she was pregnant, but no. She tells him that right around Christmas time, she's gonna go back to get her mom and her brother. But what she doesn't know, I assume, is that they are not on the same plantation anymore. So Noah is kind of shocked that she wants to go back, I think, and obviously we know that Noah does not want to go back to the Macon plantation. He's finally free. He wants to do what he wants to do. And so he's having a conversation with Elizabeth about him being free and finally having a choice in the matter. And he basically says, you know, I don't want to go back. And Elizabeth says, tell her that. And she's more concerned about the baby than anything else, I think. Elizabeth tells him, if you tell her no, then she won't go. It won't even be an option. But I believe that Rosalie will go without Noah because she needs her mom a lot right now. You know, she's pregnant and she doesn't want to go through it without her mother. We're gonna go to the scene where we see Rosalie in the bed where she's sleeping, and we have Noah pacing back and forth, and she wakes up and she asks him, is everything okay? And he says, when you asked me before what I had done, I said it didn't matter, but it does. And he tells her that while he was locked up, he thought about 3 things. He thought about her every day and every night. He thought about the house that he was going to build her. And then he takes out the ring that he made himself. And I don't know if he even got down on one knee, but he brought it to her and he was like, my first choice for freedom is you. And he's like, I'll follow you anywhere. And that was pretty much the end of that, because I'm thinking that he's gonna tell her that he doesn't want to go, but he never says anything. And so the next thing you know, they're on a carriage and they're riding out. And I was like, wait a minute now, Rosalie's been covered up, so I'm wondering, does he even look at her to see if she's pregnant? I guess all will be revealed in the next episode. I think that I covered pretty much everything in the episode. Obviously, if you have something that I didn't cover and you want to discuss it, put it in the comments down below. I would love to hear your thoughts on the episode. Thank you guys as always for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.